Hello and welcome to this episode of Someone You Know, a podcast about disabilities, those who have them, and those who love them. I'm your host, Andrew Abraham, and today I have a very special guest here with me to talk about the role of direct support professionals in the lives of people with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as discussing caregiver burnout and what can be done about it. With me today is Ms. Abigayle Jayroe, Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations at Next for Autism. We met through her leadership of the Fellows Scholarship Program, which I received during my senior year at UIC. Abigayle's vision and guidance have helped shape opportunities not just for me, but for countless other students striving to build a more inclusive world by being involved in disability support services. Thank you for being here, Abby. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
I am very excited for today's episode and to talk more about the importance of DSP workers and share some tips for attending to burnout. If you or someone you know has a disability, or if you're interested in working with people with disabilities, then this episode is for you. And even if you personally don't have or don't know anyone with a disability, chances are that someone you know loves someone with a disability. And listening here today might give you some more information on what caregivers do and the many challenges and stresses they face in their work. Let's get started. So like I mentioned in that introduction, I am very excited for this episode for a couple of reasons. I'm excited to talk about Next for Autism as an organization because they helped me financially in my senior year and in getting me connected with my job at Easter Seals, which I have been loving since I started working there in October. I'm excited to talk about the Next for Autism Fellows program because that's what got me working in disability support services. And I'm very excited to be able to introduce to all of you out there Ms. Abigayle Jayroe. As Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations at Next for Autism, Abigayle oversees all programming across the organization, working to implement and scale innovative initiatives that support autistic individuals nationwide. Prior to joining Next, Abigayle spent over a decade at the Kinney Center for Autism at St. Joseph's University, where she expanded critical services, championed neurodiverse inclusion, and even helped launch the nation's first neurodiversity in the workplace minor, a groundbreaking step toward preparing business professionals to lead with inclusivity. She remains deeply committed to her mission, helping make Philadelphia and the whole country a more inclusive place for all. So with that amazing introduction, welcome, Abby.
Thank you. So exciting to be here today.
Now, just as a first question, so we can all get to know you a little bit better, what made you want to work with people that have autism and in disability support services in general?
That's a really good question. I actually have a background in business. I have an MBA in marketing. So it might not be the most natural place for me to land, but I always like to say autism found me. I was recruited to the Kinney Center. I don't have any familial connection to autism, but once I started there, I just knew this was going to be my life's work, supporting individuals with autism and other disabilities. I always had a passion for helping others. I knew I'd probably land in the nonprofit space, but really just fell in love with this community. And also, by way of working at a university, really fell in love with working with students too. So when I got recruited to Next for Autism, it was a wonderful fit for me because I got to continue my work with autism, but also through the fellows program, continue my work with students who always are just exciting cohort of people to work with.
Yeah, thank you for your response, Abby. You mentioned that you don't have any personal or familial relations with disability. And in previous episodes of this podcast, we've talked about how a lot of people get involved in this kind of work because of their personal connections. Like I'll be interviewing Mike Baker, who is a parent advocate for his adult son. But there are plenty of other people who come to this line of work just because, like you said, it found them or the opportunity just presented them itself where somebody gets to work with students or with young adults with disabilities and just getting to see them learning new things and being able to pull off things that they weren't able to do last week and just watching the growth day to day. It's really nothing else like it. So it's really interesting to hear your story going from business to nonprofit autism work. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
And now both of us have mentioned Next for Autism. the organization, and has played a pretty big role in both of our lives, especially recently. And I just want to ask you, what exactly, in your words, is Next for Autism, and what role do you play in the organization?
Absolutely. So, Next for Autism is a national nonprofit. They've been in existence for over 20 years, and they have really the mission to advance services and independence, quality of life for autistic adults. Their main longest standing program is their grants program. So, they do a national grants program that has funded over 380 projects across 37 states and territories. And the thing that makes it really unique is one, it's focused on adults, and two, it's focused on services. So a lot of times you'll see research grants out there, but this is really boots on the ground making an impact today um, in the areas of home, social, and work. And then this year, we're also adding health and well-being to our grants process. The other really neat part about our grants program is that we have an autistic led category. So I think we might be the only program that is specifically allocating funds to uh, projects and organizations that have autistic leadership. So that is really just a fun part of my work, is getting to see nationally what the trends are and getting to support really innovative programs. The other two things that Next is devoted to right now is our fellows program, which is combating the DSP hiring crisis and training autism professionals of tomorrow, which I know we'll talk a lot about today. And then we also have a co-mentorship program, which is connecting aspiring professionals with autism to established professionals in their fields of interest. And that has really been growing exponentially. Last year, we've connected almost 200 co-mentors, and I'm excited to see how that program continues to shape up. My role in Next is really overseeing all of our programs holistically, and I've been charged with scaling nationally and just ensuring that our impact is as wide as it can be.
Yeah, based on everything you just explained, your job being having to scale and implement all of these different programs across the whole country is insane, and you're doing such a great job of it. Just the fact that people from Chicago have been so deeply touched and helped by a scholarship program started in what Next is based in New York, but you're living in Philadelphia. Is that how that's
We're
working?
incorporated in New York, and after COVID, they went remote. So it gave opportunity for people like me, I'm in Philly, um, to contribute to their mission, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's really awesome that Next has been able to grow so much, especially after the pandemic. I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, people realize how important DSP workers and other like on the ground workers are in the lives of people with disabilities, but on the other hand, it made a lot of things much harder in terms of doing business and making those in-person connections. So again, I think it's great what Next for Autism is doing. Thank you for that explanation. It was very concise and really gets to the heart of what Next as an organization is and what their bigger overarching missions are, at least from where I'm standing. So, yeah, before we move on, there's a few things that I want to mention really quick. So, last year when I received the Next Fellow Scholarship, I remember you came out to Chicago and took some of the Chicago Fellows out to Fulton Markets, and we got some great brunch there. And it was during that brunch meeting, actually, where I first floated the idea of creating a podcast specifically about disability issues, disability culture, and disability studies. And at the time, it was kind of a pie in the sky. This would be a cool thing sort of idea. But after hearing your response and the response of my friend Ashton, who was another one of the fellows who was featured in our very first episode of this podcast, it really made me think that it might not only be possible, but something that other people would genuinely be interested in watching. I kind of shifted from this would be a cool thing to do to how do I make that happen? And now, thank you for that first. And then the second thing is during that meeting, you gave us some really cool memorabilia goodie bags with some cool things in them. One of them was this sticker, saying someone you know loves someone with autism. I don't know if that camera is focusing on that the way I want it to, but it's a very nice sticker. I really like the sentiment behind it. It very much emphasizes the connections and invisible strings that connect people, that we might not always see how our actions or how our lives, the way that we live them, impact the rest of the world. But that phrase, someone you know loves someone with autism, really just emphasizes that there's so much diversity in this world, and there's so much that just from our perspectives we're not seeing, but it might be someone we know or someone we walk past on the street. And that is where the name of this podcast comes from. Because, like I say at the beginning of every episode, even if you personally have no relationship to disability, chances are someone you know loves someone with a disability, and not autism specifically. So thank you, Abby, and thank everybody at Next for being the inspiration behind all this work that I've been doing for the podcast. That would not have been possible without you or without Aston and Carrie from Easter Seals.
Well, 100%. And I have to give you kudos for taking such a huge idea and running with it. I knew you were a motivated person when I met you, and you've proven beyond that just the amazing things you've gone on to do. So kudos for making, your dream a reality, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you very much. Now that introductions and groundwork is kind of out of the way, and I finally got the chance to thank you for all the inspiration, I want to move our conversation to talking about direct support professionals, or DSPs, and their significance in the lives of people with autism. So, by dictionary definition, a direct support professional is an individual who supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, who need assistance to live the most integrated, interdependent, fulfilling, and self-directed life in the community. DSPs work with those with disabilities in their homes, community spaces, and workplaces in order to help them learn the functional living skills they need to successfully lead integrated lives within their communities while also reaching their full potential as people. Historically, DSPs played a crucial role in the deinstitutionalization movement by helping individuals with disabilities transition out of psychiatric care facilities and supporting them as they readjusted and reintegrated into everyday life. Now, being a DSP, something that I've learned being a part of the Next Fellows scholarship, is an inherently interdisciplinary job and encompasses many, many different kinds of work. Like teachers, DSPs spend time developing and implementing effective strategies in order to help their clients develop new skills and enrich current ones. Like social workers, they help people with disabilities and their families get in contact with and get benefits provided by government and community organizations near them. And like nurses, DSPs also help with dispensing medications, administering different treatments. They document care provided, and they coordinate with other medical teams in order to implement plans of care for the people that they work with. It is a job where you wear many hats and are expected to have a lot of knowledge in many different but intersecting fields. And Abby, you mentioned earlier that there's something of a DSP hiring crisis, and that the fellows program is one of the things that is meant to address this. And part of the reason there is a crisis is because there's just so much DSPs are expected to do, and not enough support or not enough information for them to know exactly all those things. So, Abby, in your experience working with Next and at the Kinney Center for the time that you did, what do direct support professionals do, and how does their job differ from, say, a paraprofessional or a standard healthcare worker?
Sure. So after a young adult, right, transitions from high school, they reach a service cliff, and if they need enough support, they might go into a day program or a residential facility. And the DSP is the boots on the ground. You described it so eloquently with that definition there, that are really providing day to day services to the individuals in those programs. So I think, you know, part of a DSP's job is always going to be caretaking because that's just the nature of the work. But at Next, we believe that the role really needs to go beyond that. It needs to encompass teaching, mentoring, all those other things you described to help uh, adults continue to learn and grow throughout their life. Like we all learn and grow throughout our life. So, an example of that might be, right? Instead of just cooking someone dinner, you're teaching nutrition, you're teaching someone how to cook themselves, you're allowing someone to choose a meal that they're excited about and incorporating them into the process. So I think for a DSP work, it's really every single there's so many opportunities to learn throughout the day, and it's really identifying those opportunities and then finding ways to incorporate the person into their own life so it's fulfilling and exciting for them. As far as it compares to a para's work, to me a para is maybe someone who's serving a child or a young adult in their school setting. So the DSP kind of picks up where the para leaves off. And it could also be more home based than a para would be. To me, a para is more in a school setting.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially on that last point. Most paraprofessionals work in school or education settings, and DSPs tend to be in day programs, transition programs, and other spaces where people with disabilities might be out and about or learning new things. And again, that biggest difference is moving from just teaching or just making sure they have these skills to empowering and mentoring and giving them the tools and the confidence and ability to be able to do some of these things for themselves. There's definitely an aspect of that in paraprofessional work. We don't try to do everything for our students. We try our best to maybe model something first, model how to put something in a bin and then have them do it, or model how to write their name or to trace out certain things in a worksheet and then see what capacity they have, not really caring about accuracy so much as are they putting in the effort to try and learn this thing, and can we keep working in this way? Is this an effective method of teaching so that they can learn these new skills?
Yeah, I think the unique thing that a DSP has is they're a lot of times spending an entire day with someone. So they really get to incorporate the teaching into the life skills. And it definitely takes a certain skill set to be able to think on the spot of how can I incorporate lifelong learning all day long. And I think there's many, many opportunities, but it's just kind of how do we teach DSPs to think in that way too? Because it is a skill and it's something that just takes practice and the ability and willingness to kind of do it. And we've met so many fabulous DSPs throughout the years that are just changing people's lives through that.
It is definitely a practice because when I first started as a paraprofessional, but also because I was coming from a place of familial personal experience, it took a little bit of time for me to snap out of the mindset of I'm going to do this for you because it looks like you're struggling and I want to help, to I know you're struggling. I know this, might be hard for you, but the best thing for me to do is to let you try and figure it out for yourself. And if you can't, then maybe that's a wash and we try something else. But it is in the trying that most of that good learning and that experience happens, where people can build on the skills that they have and learn new ones. At least I feel from the work that I've been doing.
100%.
Yeah. So earlier, I mentioned, well, we've both been mentioning the Next for Autism Fellows Scholarship Program. It is a work-based scholarship available to undergraduate and now graduate students in health-related majors, meant to increase interest in DSP work. And like we mentioned earlier, it's also meant to address the DSP hiring crisis that we are currently in, where DSP workers are hard to come across and turnover rates are high. I'll get into some more specifics in a bit. But as for the Next Fellow Scholarship, recipients are paired with an organization that specializes in caring for and supporting people with autism, where they are required to work 800 hours over the course of the scholarship. At the end of those hours, recipients automatically receive their direct support professional license and are able to work as a DSP. And for their work, students are eligible to receive up to $2,500 per semester to go toward paying their school fees and tuition. And Like I mentioned before, I was a recipient of this scholarship back in 2024 and was paired with Easter Seals Metropolitan Chicago Academy to work as a paraprofessional. I spent a lot of my downtime during my senior year at UIC working at Easter Seals in order to hit that hour requirement. And now I'm almost a year into my work. I'm coming up on, I want to say, like 500 hours, and I should be done by the end of the year if everything goes according to plan and I'm still able to work all the hours that I'm scheduled to for from now until the end of December. But what I really liked about this scholarship was how it introduced people to the world of disability support services. Of course, there's the actual experience of getting paired with an organization, but there's also an online course that helped the recipients learn a little bit more about what a DSP was, what they do, and how to work with people that have learning differences such as autism. And we also had meetings every few months where the coordinators, such as Abby, would check in with us fellows to see how we were doing, how we were adjusting to the work. It almost felt like having a disability support services 101 course, because I was also, taking my college classes at the time. So it was very nice to have something that felt like a gentler introduction to the world of working with people with autism instead of just being pushed directly into the fire, first day just working. The other thing that I really liked about this scholarship was that I was already on another scholarship while I was at UIC that paid for more or less all of my other fees and tuition. The school itself paid for that. And so the money that I got from Next for Autism basically meant my last year of college was free. I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, which was really, really nice for me and my family. We got to save up a little bit of extra money for graduate school and for some really nice vacations that we got to take together and made some really great memories. So, again, Next, thank you very much. And moving on to some questions about the fellow scholarship specifically. Abby, could you tell us from your work experience about the fellow scholarship and what is your role with the fellows?
Yeah, I think you described the nuance of it so well and just like the requirements and eligibility. I think what I'll add is maybe the purpose behind it. Just to reiterate, it's sort of twofold, right? So we're tackling that DSP hiring crisis right now by infusing the workforce with really dedicated, energized, qualified DSPs by way of these students like yourself. They're accountable, they're going to show up. And actually, year over year, you didn't get to experience this, Andrew, because you were a senior, but actually, the scholarship increases annually with the goal of retention because we want students to stay with us year over year so that our service providers have that continuity of care. So that's the first part is really just the immediate and infusing the workforce with those hours. But the really neat part is the long-term impact. And we're excited to continue to measure that. It's a fairly new program. We're heading into our third year. But the hope is that students will learn about intellectual disabilities, will learn about autism, and will be able to infuse the lessons they learned and that firsthand experience into their careers, whether that be they're inspired to stay in this field and really dedicate their lives to this workforce, or that they are able to infuse whatever the work they do with this newfound empathy, with this newfound skill set, because no matter what, right, a nurse is going to see a plethora of different patients. A speech and language pathologist is going to meet all different clients. So you're going to have that built in experience to now be able to serve the community in this new exciting way. And the impact is going to quadruple or even more than quadruple down the line as you are able to touch the lives of many, many more autistic adults or intellectually disabled adults through your career. So I think the immediate is really exciting, and those hours being infused and that we're counting is really exciting. But I think what's going to be even more amazing to see down the line is how the ripple effect of this program. I'm sure you're going to go on and just wow us with all the lives you change beyond what you've already done through the program. So that's what really excites me.
Yeah, it's a very exciting program to be a part of. I remember back in my junior year, I was just scrolling through the random announcements that the applied health sciences would send out to all the majors. And I saw, something from Next for Autism. And I thought it was a cool scholarship. My parents were always like, keep your eyes open for scholarships. They might send you more money. And so I applied, I put in my application and had that interview with you and Candace, one of the other coordinators. But I got into that interview and I thought it was like nothing super special or difficult until the very, very end, where you asked me if there's anything else that I wanted to say. And I remember, I don't know what, like the spirit of some really great public speaker just took over me. And I just started saying, like, this is more than a job to me. This is my life. This is what I've been doing since as long as I can remember. And I know how impactful this work is. And it was at that moment, like saying all those things, I realized, hey, this is actually what I want to be doing with my life at this point in time. Because I was having a lot of second thoughts and guessing what it is I actually wanted to do. Because the first half of my college experience, I wanted to go to law school and be a lawyer. But coming up on my junior year, I'm like, hey, I actually don't think that'll make me happy. I think law school is not a place I will thrive. But encountering this scholarship really kind of helped nudge me onto the path I'm on right now. And I am so very happy with the work that I'm doing and how my life is flowing right now. So I think it was the best decision for me at that time that I could have made. And just kind of as a follow up to the purpose of offering the scholarship, how successful would you say going into its third year that the Next Fellows program has been?
I think it's been incredibly successful. Every year, we're essentially doubling the number of recipients of the scholarship. And honestly, this year we weren't even planning on entering a new region, but just by way of the demand and need in New York City, we crept from Westchester, New York into New York City. And that has been really one of our biggest applicant pools this year. So I anticipate the regions will grow year over year and will only be held back by the amount of money we can raise and then reinvest into the students. So really, I think it's going our our enrollment has exceeded projections every year. So that has been really fabulous. And students are staying in the program. I think our retention is in the 90% range, which is also higher than our original goals we set for ourselves. I can't yet speak to what our graduates are going on to do. This year was our first year of graduates, you being part of that class. So I think in about a year, maybe we can regroup and I can talk to you about what our alumni have gone on to do.
It sounds like we have at least one more episode in the works then.
Yeah.
No, that's really great to hear the success you've been experiencing with the Fellows program. I can say from a student perspective, I think it's been very successful and very impactful in my life and the work that I'm doing and will continue to do. So like, just keep doing what you're doing. It's great stuff and it's definitely appreciated. And so I kind of touched on a little bit of this earlier when talking about the course that the Next Fellows program offers, but just to hear it from you, how does one train to be a direct support professional to get that license if they're not part of the Fellows program? And is there a set curriculum or standard of knowledge for those training to be DSPs?
Yeah, it's really interesting the way it works in the United States. So the requirements vary state by state and even in some instances county by county. But typically the baseline requirement are things like passing a background check. And then the trainings, there are a set of trainings that are required, but what they usually are around are compliance and safety, bloodborne pathogens and mandated reporter and those types of things, which are incredibly important and a great baseline of knowledge. I think what Next aims to do through the curriculum that you described, it's actually a curriculum we offer beyond Next for Fellows to agencies who are interested in kind of delving a little deeper than that compliance, is we call it Next for DSP, but The 4 pillars are choice, belonging, healthy living, and lifelong learning. And it kind of just does what we talked about in the beginning is how do we go beyond that caretaking? Now that we know how to keep people safe, how do we now get them involved in their life and help them be the most independent, happy versions of themselves? And what role can DSPs play in that? And really, all of our fellows go through that training. And then, as you described, meet quarterly to discuss anything that's going on through their work as DSPs that maybe ties into those themes and how we can kind of talk through ways to implement on a case by case basis. So it's kind of like a little group session, teaching session that we talk through the themes in real time.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that meeting every quarter, every few months was a great way to connect with the other fellows and also know that we're kind of on the right track. And again, for a mostly online program where you do the course online, you put in your hours online, it was nice to have that actual face to face, even if it was over a screen, contact with the other people doing similar things to me. And you mentioned that most DSP training involves those like bloodborne pathogens, mandatory reporter, just safety compliance training. We do those at Easter Shields and where I'm working right now, Little Friends. And it's, a basic module of do you know how to prevent the spread of this disease or do you know what to do when this thing happens? And they're helpful, but they can be completed pretty quickly. And at a certain point, when someone works in that field for long enough, it's kind of just like, oh, I have to do this thing again. So, not the best perspective to have, but I absolutely understand that because these trainings are kind of the bare minimum. Like, they are, like you said, just for compliance to make sure that people know this on paper. But what Next for Autism does with the online course and with the actual work part of the scholarship is giving people that firsthand experience, the things that you can't pick up from going over a module. Um, Even just working with the students, each class, each individual, you'll have to do that differently. And it's almost like you have to relearn how to do the job for every new class, for working with new students. It's just making sure you have that openness.
100%. I think you nailed it, right? Like every single day can be a little different on how you implement these themes. And I think it's just a great opportunity to kind of connect and talk through and brainstorm even how can I implement choice in this setting? Or how do I incorporate learning? It feels like it's just going, out in the community and we're going to a movie. How would I incorporate learning and going to a movie? Well, you can do money management. You can look up the times on your computer, right? There's lots of ways. And when you were talking and formulating together, those are the times where I feel like learn the most. And it's kind of fun too. I wanted to mention one other thing that I failed to mention with the training piece is that our community partners, so Next has moved to a model where and you were part of this model, where we're placing students with community partners that we know. And I will say the community partners that we're placing students with tend to have more in-depth training than these just compliance training. So we're partnering with organizations that we really trust deeply and that we know are providing the students with a more elevated experience than maybe a typical agency would. So above and beyond even what Next is providing, we know that our organizational partners are also kind of the best out there, which is a great first experience, like you mentioned, for students, right? You're dipping your toe in the water. You want to be with an organization that's going to completely support you and be there and train you as you go along, because that is essential. So we're really thoughtful in where we place students. I actually visited Easter Seals when I came out to the brunch time with you, and I was blown away by what they were doing.
Yeah, the Easter Seals that I'm working at in downtown Chicago is a great facility with amazing staff who care so much about their students. Their passion shines through into every action that they do. And I'm so happy that I was able to work with them, that I was given the opportunity to get to know their students, to know the staff, and be a part of the company culture. And yeah, they have been giving me great like on the ground experience. Literally every day looks different for me because I was transitioning from classroom to classroom. And I think I'll be doing something pretty similar when I go back for the summer session. So I really like that part of my job as well, where I basically get a wide range of experience because I'm moving from different classes, different age groups, different curriculums. It can be a little disorienting, but I think overall it's a great like longitudinal view of the kind of work that I'll be doing.
I will say my time at the Kinney Center, and I imagine your time at Easter Seals, one of my biggest takeaways was that flexibility. And it is such an invaluable skill to learn early in your career, because your whole life is flexibility, and to not be thrown off by an off day, because every day is a little different, I have found to really serve me well. So what a gift that you're able to do it before like truly entering into the workforce. So I'm sure you're going to be a nimble employee when the time is right.
Really hope so. I've had a lifelong time of practice, so hopefully I'll be good at it. So the other thing that I wanted to highlight in this episode and while talking with you is caregiver burnout. And that's because it is especially prevalent in jobs involving caregiving and or supervision of those with disabilities. According to the 2021 NCI State of the Workforce Survey, the average state turnover rate for DSPs was over 43%, with the average vacancy rate varying between 16.5% for full-time positions and 20.3% for part-time work. When it comes to turnovers in jobs like DSPs or being a paraprofessional, that can really cause problems in continuity and consistency with the people that we work with. Because if there's a lot of new people coming in and dropping out of the workforce, then they don't get the time to get to know these patients or these students, and they don't get the time to build that rapport so that student trusts them as they work to learn new skills and be more integrated into the community. Now, to add my own experience, I've known many paraprofessionals and other special education staff who work second or even third jobs in order to make their ends meet, and the exhaustion that they feel after working causes many of them to either like take breaks for a week or two, or when that 2 weeks is up, they just quit because the demands of their job and all their other responsibilities aren't as balanced as they could be. And that's not their fault because this job can be very, very physically, mentally, and emotionally draining, especially in relation to the wages that people are earning, with DSPs especially being underpaid. And, sometimes during these days of work, you have to help students who are much larger with mobility needs or with transitioning from place to place, or you need to stay calm and collected when multiple students are having a crisis. And then there's the times where your heart breaks for a student because you're working with them and you know what they've been through, what they're going through, what they're going to go through for future stuff sometimes. And again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, all of those things are very, very taxing. It's had an effect on me and the others that I work with, whether it's being physically tired from having to chase students around or being mentally tired from having to listen to many multiple competing stims at the same time, or very loud music from iPads. I know there are a few nursery rhymes and children's songs that me and my coworkers have memorized at this point. One of my students really likes listening to Hickory Dickory Dock in Japanese. Um, so I,
Japanese.
Japanese. I don't know where he found the
Okay,
Japanese version, but
cool.
every night, every day at the end of the day before he gets on his bus to go home, he'll look up. It's monkeys jumping on the bed, ants go marching, and Hickory Dickory Dock on repeat.
I had
So
years of Veggie Tales, years and years of Veggie Tales. Yeah.
decades. I have had literal decades of Veggie Tales. I can sing almost every silly song with Larry from Heart. Just give me the first few notes and I could probably piece the rest together. But yeah, I definitely know What I'm trying to get at is that I understand why burnout is common among those who work in disability support services and related jobs. And now that I have personal experience on like an actual job and not just at home with my brother listening to his YouTube videos on computer, I think it's important to acknowledge and to have these open discussions about burnout, how to identify it, and how to care for it. So, Abby, before we go too further on, what experience do you have or what do you know about caregiver burnout working in the positions that you have?
Yeah, I think your description was spot on, right? It's the fatigue, it's the anxiety sometimes, it's the overwhelm of having your own life, being so passionate and caring so deeply for others, and then likely having potentially other caregiving responsibilities on top of that for those of us who have families of our own. So I think the way you described it was spot on. And it is a pervasive problem, not only for DSPs, but a lot of people in nonprofit work, I think, and in these caring fields where we're dedicating our lives to helping others.
Yeah, burnout is, again, not just specific to disability support services, but for all people, especially in the United States, where we have this culture of working, producing is the only way that you can be valued and the only way that you like prove yourself to other people. And so that mentality can really cause people to work to the point where they physically and mentally aren't able to do so without a break. And it can be very dangerous for them. And especially when it comes to those working in disability support services, it can also cause changes in personality. So, definitionally, burnout can be defined as a state of physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion as a result of being overwhelmed by the responsibilities and stresses of providing care to others. It is when the stress that someone is experiencing exceeds the capacity of their coping mechanisms and to handle and assuage that stress, and can be very serious in some cases, leading to suicidal thoughts and actions. And for people in disability support service work, when you get to that point of burnout, it can cause personality changes where you might normally be happy and bubbly and very energetic, but when you're burned out, you're physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. You might be shorter with people or ruder to others unintentionally. And that does have an impact on the care that you are able to provide for your loved ones, for your clients, for your patients. And those that work with people with disabilities, like DSPs and paraprofessionals, are especially at risk for experiencing something called STS, or secondary traumatic stress. And what that is basically describing the adverse effects that those who are around and exposed to trauma and trauma survivors can experience after long periods of time. So think EMTs or medics in hospitals, but also direct support professionals and paras who spend a lot of time with students one on one. They're at an increased risk of experiencing STS by maybe seeing the hoops and hurdles they need to jump through physically to get through a space, the obstacles that parents and families face when administrations get involved and you need to work with, say, a school administration to get the rights and accommodations that a student is legally entitled to, and being exposed to that student's home life because maybe there's something going on at home or the family's not in a great financial state. That can weigh heavy on someone. I think the biggest way I see that in my work is when it comes to shoes. So many students that I work with have shoes that are too small. And when it comes to, like, a lot of times they kick off their shoes when they get into school because it's uncomfortable. And the parents will know, like, that's a way of self regulating. When it comes time to get them back on at the end of the day, sometimes it's a big struggle. One, because they're hyper and running around, and two, because those shoes are too small and too uncomfortable and they don't want to put them back on because they hurt. Because who wants to wear shoes that are too small? And just because someone isn't able to express that with words doesn't mean that they still aren't feeling that discomfort. So DSPs and paras are at an increased risk of experiencing this secondary traumatic stress. And in a 2022 research study, at least 12.4% of direct support professionals met the diagnostic criteria for full-blown PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So working in these fields can be, even if it's not you that it's happening to personally, just seeing and being around that kind of trauma can be jarring for someone who's not used to being in those settings or experiencing those things. And this is why it's important to address and acknowledge caregiver burnout when it arises, because it not only impacts your mental and physical health, but it can also impact the mental and physical health of those you are providing care for and impact your ability to provide quality care for them. And now, Abby, from your experience, how would you say caregiver burnout factors into the work you do at Next and with the Fellows program, if at all?
Yeah, I think really interesting point that you touched upon of like being able to be in a place where you can provide really stellar care. And I think part of that is dealing with your burnout proactively and being able to self regulate so that you can then be in these situations that can be really dysregulating and bring a really calm self. So that is a good reason and need for avoiding burnout at all cost, right? I think what Next does specifically by way of the Fellows program are some of the things we discussed. We have these, I think the training actually is a really good way to avoid burnout, right? Being well prepared for your job, having the skill set and the resources to be able to do your job effectively, I think is a really great way for companies and organizations to help their employees avoid burnout. Um, Being able to provide this financial support, right? So that you're not worrying about having to work those second and third jobs to pay for school. That's part of what Next is trying to contribute, is being able to offset some of those other burdens for our students, so that they can avoid that issue, which is a huge thing with DSPs. As you mentioned, just the pay and having to work multiple jobs, short of changing how things are done on a national scale, which I believe needs to be done, right? And professionalizing the DSP work and compensating people accordingly. Um, Putting some of these other things in place, like the trainings, I think is essential. And then just other little things like we have open office hours where we're accessible for students even outside of those quarterly meetings to contact us and troubleshoot or just complain or whatever it may be. I think also having this network of students, right, that we're our goal is to place students with at least a couple other students from their school, right? So that you have a peer in the workforce, not only a colleague, but someone else from UIC, like Ashton, who you're working alongside, where you can kind of gut check one another and say, yeah, I'm experiencing this too. And it's really hard. And I think just that baseline communication and saying, like, this exists, this is a real thing, I'm struggling, and hearing someone else say, like, yeah, I'm struggling too, this is really hard, is a really nice thing to have in this type of profession. So those are some of the things we've put in place to support our students, and also putting them in organizations that we know are also having all these background supports and trainings, and have stopgaps in place for employees. But that's our goal through the fellows program, to support burnout and also being flexible, right? We always are encouraging our students that first and foremost they are students, and we realize that they have 101 other really important things that they are involved in. So I think we always do our best to be supportive and flexible and available.
And there's a few things I really love about your answer, Abby. First of all, that the first thing you said was that training, letting the future generation of DSPs have a better foundation for the work that they're doing. In some of the research that I did leading up to this episode, one of the single best things that was listed as a way of caring for burnout is to educate yourself on the job that you're doing, on the requirements, to make sure that you know your position so that doesn't become a source of stress, but also educating yourself on how to identify burnout when it arises, which I'll talk about in just a bit. But also, that second thing you said about making sure that students have a peer or another person with them at the organization, just to like talk about the work that they're doing. And me and Ashton have definitely developed that relationship since we've been working with Easter Seals. And a few times she actually gave me rides back after work, which was very appreciated because I didn't have to wait for the bus. One time the bus actually forgot me and I had to wait a full 10 minutes for the next one. And so that I'm very glad that I didn't have to rely on public transportation for a few Wednesdays during work. Um, but yeah, just being able to talk about the job and our experience with Next helped me like form that camaraderie. And it was just nice to have someone I could talk to who knows what it's like to both work at Easter Seals with the students that we work with, because sometimes we work with a lot of the same students, but also what it's like to go to school and to work while also being a student, and the many responsibilities and other complications that arise because of that situation. And again, I really appreciated having Ashton as kind of my sounding board, to talk about our good times, our bad times, and what we are looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to working with her during the summer. She actually is still working at Easter Seals right now. She's texted me a few things have changed since I've left. Some rooms have been moved around. Some students have been moved to different teachers. So apparently it's for the best. I think I'm very excited to see how things have changed and how they are, kind of rethinking the way that they do things at Easter Seals, which again goes into that idea of flexibility, of organizations being flexible with their students and also with the staff when they see something isn't working in a particular room or with a particular staff member. They do their best to try and make it work, to shake things up or just try and find the best possible way to connect with these students while also making sure that the paras are not burning out, are not feeling like they want to quit, and are appreciated for the work that they do. Now, I know in my time as a paraprofessional, I've learned to better identify and care for my feelings of burnout when they come up. Some of the things that I like to do when I notice a burnout, and to me, it's just kind of, being so tired at the end of the day, I can barely even think. So what I like to do is, especially during those times, I like to take time after work to just be lazy, stare at the ceiling for a little bit. I also like to talk with other people who know what it's like, such as my mom or my other coworkers. And I also like to meditate in order to center myself and give my mind a bit of a break from all the demands of a very, very busy day. Some other research backed methods of caring for symptoms of burnout include maintaining your physical and mental health through diet and exercise, which I definitely need to work on, taking breaks and time for yourself guilt free, possibly by taking advantage of respite care or other day programs if you are a family care worker and are living with your loved one that you're caring for, and also building a support system of people in similar situations in order to combat those feelings of isolation. I think it is very underrated, just that experience of knowing that you're not alone and now no longer thinking I'm the only person experiencing these specific stressors. It can be a very isolating mental loop to get yourself stuck in. But once you see other people who are going through those same things, who have those struggles, then you're like, oh, that's just what happens. It's okay to burn out sometimes. Um, and like I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things you can do is to educate yourself, not only about the job that you are doing, but how to recognize the symptoms and onset of burnout so that you can take care of yourself when that happens. And the last thing I want to mention is I think it's very important to let people know that it's okay to feel burnt out and to be overwhelmed by the demands of a caregiving position, whether it's a formal job you're getting paid for or an informal commitment you're doing for a friend or a family. The human mind and body can only take so much mental, emotional, and physical stress before the cracks begin to show. And that's okay. We as people, like I mentioned earlier, are not meant to be working, producing, and stressing 24/7. Like any machine or mechanism or anything with moving parts, anything more complex than like a lever, let's say, that works for long periods of time without a break, it needs rest and maintenance in order to function at its best, which is why it's important to recognize and be preventative when signs of burnout appear. Because, in my experience, it's better to schedule those breaks for your mind and your body when you have the capacity to, rather than have your mind and body schedule those breaks for you when you're just so past the point of burnt out that everything is just falling apart. Now, Abby, my last question for you is, in your experience, what can caregivers, both formal and informal, do to either prevent or minimize the impacts of burnout? And you did mention a lot in the last question I asked you, so I apologize if there's a lot of overlap.
No, no, I think it's great, and I think you also described a lot of the things I would absolutely recommend. I this is kind of the cliche thing, but people say put on your oxygen mask right before you put on others, and you really do have to take care of yourself before you have the capacity to kind of give to others. So I think some of the things you mentioned, like building in a routine where you're scheduling things that are going to be good for your mental health, whether that is seeing a therapist or your physical exercise, your diet. A lot of times as a caregiver, we're forgetting to eat lunch or drink water. So taking the time to do even those very simple things, go for a walk, are crucial to being able to be present for those we're caring for. I think the therapeutic rapport of having those dialogues and friendships with colleagues and people in similar situations is also crucial. And I think maybe one thing, without, reiterating too much, that I is really difficult for, I know it's difficult for me, but also really important, is knowing when to ask for help and not being scared to ask for help when you need it, right? So I think I listened to a different podcast, not the one we're on, but where they talked about how people really want to help, and the way you build community is actually asking for help. So I think what a fabulous way to uh, deepen your friendships and your community than, being able to communicate, this is really hard for me, and here's a way you can support me. And that's really difficult to do, but especially in the society that we're living in, right? You mentioned producing, and it's really hard to ask for help. But I think it is a nice way to support yourself, and then also, build your relationships. People are really surprisingly helpful and want to do it, and it makes them feel really good too. So it's kind of like a win-win.
Yeah, I didn't mention it explicitly, but routine is a big part of caring for burnout. Just to have a regular routine made up of those things that I mentioned: exercise, diet, taking time for oneself, just having that consistency. It's good not only for the people that we work with autism, but also for ourselves and our bodies, and just building in good habits so that on a really bad day when everything just seems out of reach, that habit is still there at the back of the mind that kind of is like, oh, it's time to do this thing.
Yeah.
Like with the class that I'm working with now, we have timers that go off to mark the transition from one subject to another, say from like math to reading, or from vocational jobs to lunchtime. So we like have those timers, and even if a student is in the middle of like bouncing on their big yoga ball or playing with some toys, the students in that room hear that timer, they know, oh, it's time for our next thing. It's habit for them, it's routine, that every half hour we get the timer, time to go back to seat and wait for our next activity. So yeah, and also just don't ignore the advice that you're giving to your students, I think is a great way of caring for burnout, because a lot of the things that we tell our students to do to regulate themselves work for us too, like to do a little walk, to maybe get a little squeezy, or um and just run around for a bit, get the wiggles out. It is incredibly regulating, and I've realized being present for the walks that I take with my students around the building when we go for exercise in the morning, I feel more calm and ready to face the day, even though it's so hot. Like these past few days, it has
Yes.
been so hot. And even the students are like, yeah, I don't want to be out here anymore. It's time to go back inside after like one lap around the building. So, yeah, recognizing to have those good routines, but also when it's not possible, shifting.
Yeah, and I love the framing of we know what to recommend to others, and taking our own advice is so important. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, especially in this field of work, because we give a lot of advice to our students, especially when they're dysregulated. So we know intellectually, academically, what those things are, but the process of applying it to ourselves and doing that self reflection can sometimes be a little more difficult than you would expect, but very possible. Now, just kind of to wrap things up, caregiver burnout is a very real condition with very real symptoms and consequences if left untreated. So, the best thing we can do is to educate ourselves about the work that we're doing, what burnout looks like, and how to take care of ourselves when we feel it coming. And that process will be unique to each person. I can't stand here and tell you what it is that you have to do to avoid yourself burning out. But with time and knowledge of both yourself and the work that you're doing, burnout no longer needs to be something that becomes debilitating for caregivers. And it can be something that just signals us that we need to maybe take a little break or look at things differently for a little bit. Abby, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be a part of this podcast and to talk about Next for Autism, the Fellows Program, the great work that you're doing for direct support professionals, people in the field, and also talking with me about the DSP crisis, burnout, and just all of these other great things. I have loved getting to know you and Next for Autism over this last year, and I'm hoping that we can keep our relationship alive.
100%. I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to be on the podcast, and also just think you're lovely. And I know we'll continue to be in touch. I encourage you, if you're going to grad school, to come back to the fellows program. So, I think we'll have lots of fruitful conversations, and we already have our next podcast penciled in. So you'll have to
Oh,
chat with me
nice.
again.
We'll have to. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Someone You Know. If you learned something new or found something in this episode interesting, leave a comment and share this video with a friend. I hope those with caregiving experiences can take something helpful away from our discussion here today. And even if you aren't a caregiver or have experience with disability in your life, remember from earlier, chances are that someone you know loves someone with a disability. Now you know just a little bit more about what caregiving looks like for them. We'll see you guys next time.